This is another in our series of videos introducing you to the Bausch Systems DSD route accounting application for Android. In this video we're going to cover how to edit an existing transaction or void an existing transaction. As you can see, we've got the sales module screen up, and in that screen we've got three customers that have transactions entered. So we've got Economy Market, they have an invoice, we have Stewart's Drug with an order, and we have Village Market with an invoice and a credit memo. As you can see, the Village Market and the Economy Market, they both have already had a signature capture done, and I have the feature turned on within the system that will lock the transaction once a signature capture has been done. So as we can see, both the invoice and the credit memo have a squiggly line, and that tells me that there's been signature capture for that, and the same thing on the invoice, squiggly line telling us that that invoice is locked because it's been signature captured as well. So if I highlight that invoice with the signature capture, you can see that the edit button down here is grayed out. It's not available. So I won't be able to do an edit on those transactions, but if I go into my Stewart's Drug order that's been created here, and I highlight that one so we can tell the system which one we want to take action on, you'll notice that the edit button becomes available. So that tells us we can go ahead and do an edit on that. By hitting the edit button, it'll open up that transaction. Now we do have the auto prompting feature turned on still, so that's why we're getting the auto prompting coming up. I'm not going to use the the auto prompting to do our editing. We're going to cancel that so that that screen is taken down, and it'll take us right into the invoice, or in this case it's an order. The line items on the order, they can be edited, but in this process what I'm going to do first is add a line item to this order. And to add a line item, you can still do the same process like you would do, where you scan the product or you select it from the product list. I'm going to select it from the product list, and we'll choose a half gallon of skim milk, and we'll put in our quantity. The quantity, let's say, is 6, and we'll hit the enter to select that, or enter that line item in. Now that line's been added to the list. So adding to by editing the invoice by adding to it is just the normal process of adding line items. If you wanted to change the quantity, that's where you'll do a little bit different process than you may have seen in the other videos. So we're going to select the line item that we want to edit, and let's say, for example, we look here and the customer says, no, I need more than 6, I need you to sell me 8, can you give me 2 more? So you'll be adding 2 additional units to the skim milk line item. To do that, we'll tap on it to highlight it, and then in our quantity field, if we just type in the number 2, because we want to add 2 to the 6, and we'll hit add, that will now change the quantity from 6 to 8. We just added 2 more. If the customer wanted fewer items, so we originally had 6 there, now we've got 8, maybe the customer says, no, I really need 4 of those, 8 is too many. You can, again, highlight it to select it. We'll change the quantity from 8 to 4, but now instead of hitting the add button, because if I hit the add button, I'm going to add 4 additional units to that line. What I want to do is hit the edit button, and the edit button is essentially telling the system to replace the quantity on that line from 8 to 4. So when I hit the edit button, you'll see now that the quantity is set to 4 units rather than 8. So just to recap that, you'll select the line item, you'll go into the quantity field, you'll put in the quantity that you want to change it to, and then hit the edit button. When I was adding the additional products, I could have changed the quantity from 6 to 8 by highlighting it, putting in the number 8, and then hitting the edit button, rather than hitting it, and then putting in the quantity of 2 and hitting the add button. So when you're increasing, you can use the add or the edit. But if you're decreasing, you'll want to just use that edit option, or the edit button. You'll also notice that we don't have a delete button on the screen. We have a clear button. The clear button is really just to kind of refresh this data entry portion of the screen. So if I tap on the line item and that puts the information in there, and if I wanted this to be blanked out, not deleted, but just cleared, just hit the clear button, and then that would make this field available to me again. So to delete the line item, what you want to do is enter in a quantity of 0. And a 0 quantity says to remove that product from the transaction. So that's what we'll do with the skim milk. We're going to remove that skim milk line item by, first of all, highlighting it. We'll change the quantity to 0, And then we're going to hit the edit button. We're going to replace the 4 with a 0, and the 0 tells the system to remove the line item from the order. At that point, we're finished with our editing. We can go ahead and save it. It'll ask us if we want to confirm it. I'm going to go ahead and tell it, yes, let's turn it into an invoice now. And that's the process of, once we've saved the invoice, the process of editing line items by removing them or editing. The final thing we're going to show here is we're going to show how to void a transaction. So you're not able to delete a transaction. Say, for example, you create an invoice for a customer and they decide not to take the delivery, but you've already saved that invoice because you printed it for them. You won't be able to delete that invoice, but you'll be able to void it. We want to keep the audit trail, so a void will be effectively the same as a delete. It just reserves that invoice code so that the office has a good audit trail. So to void a transaction, you'll need to select that transaction. So I'm going to stick with the Stewart Drug transaction that we just did. It'll need to be highlighted. And if you highlight it, then that tells the system whatever is highlighted that you're going to take action on that transaction. And the action we're going to do is hit the void button. So when we hit the void button, we'll get a confirmation just asking us, you sure you want to void this transaction, yes or no? And if I say yes, that'll void the transaction. If I say no, it cancels that process and takes me back and leaves the invoice intact. I'm going to go ahead and say yes, I want to void it. And now you can see, if I go back to my Stewart Drug, you can see it was an invoice that's been voided. We've got a little slashed circle sign there and the word void, so you can tell that that's a transaction that's been voided. And that covers the editing and voiding of transactions.